Hi, good evening. Welcome to the Council and Committee of the Whole meeting for the Municipality of West Nipissing for December 6th. I'd just like to start the meeting with a land acknowledgement. The Municipality of West Nipissing respectfully acknowledges that we are located on the homelands of the Anishinaabe peoples on the traditional territory of the Nipissing, Temagami, and Dokis First Nations, covered by the Robinson-Huron Treaty. We honor and recognize their historic connection to the land and value their significant contributions in shaping and strengthening our communities. First, I'd just like to ask any declarations of pecuniary interest? None? Okay, can I get, you have movers and seconders?
I do. It is moved by Councillor Gagné and seconded by Councillor Crushine. Be it resolved that the agenda for the meeting of council held on December the 6th, 2022 be approved as presented.
Okay. Any objections? Okay, all in favor? Sorry. Okay. And then we're going to go straight into Committee of the Whole. As I intend to appoint myself as Chair of General Government, I'll continue chairing for this portion of the meeting. So the first item on this part of the agenda is amending the governance of the Planning Advisory Committee. And Mr. Barbeau.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. You'll see that if I need any assistance for any more detail or history that I might not be aware of, I'll ask Mr. Sharm to step in. But Mr. Sharm has indicated or provided you with a memo and the historical aspect of the Planning Committee has had 5 councillors and 2 members at large. What this is proposing is basically to have 4 councillors and 3 at large. Some of the reasons that were mentioned, obviously, is that the 5 councillors, so it's a planning committee and it provides advice and it gets ratified back at council, but you already have 5 councillors that were there. And so we felt it might be better governance and more appropriate if you had 4 councillors and then it be brought back here for ratification. And so if there's anything else, Melanie, are there any additional comments on that?
I don't think so.
No, that's the main. It also, provides for more public participation in the process as well. So 3 at large is better than 2. Anyway, that's all I have to say, Madam Mayor. And if
You're open to the floor to any questions in regards to this item? None? Any objections to it, or like,
Yes.
because it's a committee?
Yeah.
So everybody would be in favor of us putting that through, so that would appear on the next agenda as a motion during the regular portion of the meeting. Okay, no objections? Okay. The next item is to amend the governance of the Economic Development Advisory Committee. Again, there's a memo that's been prepared, and I'll pass it on to Mr. Barbeau for comments.
Thank you. Through you again, Your Worship. Basically what we'd like to do with terms of reference is that we'd like to ensure there are a lot of really interesting opportunities that are going to present themselves in the not too distant future and hopefully for years to come. And what we wanted to do when we were discussing this, we were speaking with the mayor and with Mr. Poulain about trying to ensure that we have sector representation for the key sectors that we believe will drive our economy forward. And it isn't a must-have, but if our terms of reference were altered to reflect the sectors that are listed here. So obviously agriculture, tourism, mining and forestry are resource-based in the northern part of our area, retail and commercial, and industrial and manufacturing, and the education and or labor market development sector. So those are suggestions that we make. They're kind of the key areas. We've been at this for in some cases longer than I care to admit. And usually those are the sectors that we're working with, historically. And so if we wanted to ensure when you're looking at appointing members of the Economic Development Committee, that we ensure that there's a good cross-section of representation. The other thing I would say as well is what it helps us if you have the right people is they can open up doors in various sectors as well. So if you have somebody from, let's say, the industrial sector as an example, who has contacts in his or her industry, then that helps West Nipissing. And so, that's what we're really trying to get when we're trying to get people at that at the table. So I don't know that I have anything to add, Mr. Poulet.
No, I think you've covered it all.
Okay. Open the floor for questions. Yes, Councillor Resto.
Through you, Madam Chair, I have a question for Jay. I'm just curious. I agree with this. I think it's great that we have, and you see in a lot of different areas, organizations are looking at skills-based boards, and this is something similar to it, right?
Yeah.
Looking at different. We finished up our call for interested parties for our board, so we're going to open this back up because we're revising this at the end of the month, or do we think we have enough who've submitted that will be okay?
Well, without I think we do. I think there, if I'm not mistaken and not jumping the gun, through you, Madam Mayor, sorry about that. There are about 15 who have put their name forward, which is quite positive in the community. It wasn't our intention to reopen it. It was just our intention to have this as a consideration, and it isn't a must where you want to name, Jane Doe or John Smith, and they don't fall in that category. But it does give you a good guide as to what would work for the benefit of the community. So it isn't a must, but you should have regard for these industries.
Any other questions? Councillor Tessier.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, to either Mr. Barbeau or Mr. Poulet. You put a list, which is a list, but I think the art and cultural sector should also maybe be involved, because with the film industry, all the theaters and dance groups singing could be involved in helping with when the film industry comes in, that they could use some of our people to be part of the film and helping with the setup and other things like that as well.
Through you, Your Worship, I could respond to that only by saying that that's a great idea, Councillor Tessier. One of the things that we are going to be talking about in the term session is perhaps plans to provide its own emphasis on the arts and culture. And so though it may not form part here, or you can add it here, but where we want to get representation from the arts and culture sectors, I believe we're going to be looking at what councils, this is something that's going to be presented to council, and it was the idea of Madam Mayor. And so one of the emphasis where we're talking about community services is having an emphasis on that. And that's why it wasn't included here, is we're planning on including it elsewhere.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Okay, can we get a consensus as to whether everybody's in agreement that we ask staff, give staff direction to amend this policy to bring it back for approval for our next meeting? All in, we'll just do a quick, okay. So then at the December 20th meeting, we'll have updated terms of reference for both planning and for economic development. Next item on the agenda, 41C, is a review of the Integrity Commissioner and Code of Conduct policy. And again, I will defer to Mr. Barbeau for a little background on this and to walk us through. Thank you.
Sure. Well, I just regained puberty. The memo was fairly self-explanatory. It's already in 2016. The province amended the Municipal Act And I'm going to paraphrase a little bit just to move forward and not to bore you too much. But prior to 2016, there was legislation and information about having integrity commissioners, but they weren't mandatory. Codes of conduct weren't mandatory. The most recent legislation, provincial legislation, made it mandatory. And so there's two combined aspects is the code of conduct, and corresponding with the code of conduct is how the code of conduct is enforced, which is by the use of an integrity commissioner. Now, the code of conduct that it basically deals with these 4 items, which is basically receiving gifts and benefits for council, their respectful conduct, including amongst yourselves and to staff and others, handling confidential information, and then use of municipal property for your own benefit. The integrity commissioner, have a lot of ums here. We had an integrity commissioner this last term, in the past term. The integrity commissioner was appointed by council. The work that was done was through our clerk in the recruitment of the integrity commissioner. And obviously, that process took place throughout the 4 years. The integrity commissioner basically rules on complaints made by the code with the code of conduct. Also rules on the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, and pretty much does that. They have 4 functions, as you can see. They have an advisory function. So the integrity commissioner could provide advice to all of council as a whole if requested. The integrity commissioner can provide advice to individual councillors who have questions. Am I in conflict? Am I not in conflict? And that kind of thing before moving. So the integrity commissioner can be a very valuable resource for individual members of council. Obviously, the integrity commissioner and the salacious part of what we saw recently is in the complaint adjudications, which is basically receiving complaints, dealing with complaints, ruling on complaints, having a finding, and bringing it back to council for action. Now, and then obviously education, which is part of the same advisory portion of it. The ramifications or the penalties under the Municipal Act indicate 2 items, a censure or a reprimand, and or the potential loss of remuneration. It's a fancy word for loss of pay. Those are the 2 aspects that are contemplated in the Municipal Act. Council, in moving forward, can potentially add in their code of conduct where they could potentially ask for an apology. That was an issue in the last term, but unless it's contemplated in your code of conduct or in any documentation, then there's no legislation to require that. And so the only way you'd be able to do that is by amending your code of conduct or your IC information. I thought I would go through, you were issued 2 codes of conduct, one amended and then the original one. The original one I found should be in there because it's the old code of conduct. It actually provided for information on how to handle complaints coming to me. And then when I receive it, I go to council right at the next meeting, and council discusses things in closed session, and then it determines whether contravention existed and what to do about it, and then they go in open session. That was all 2 terms ago, and it just didn't get, so that's an old code. The new code basically deals with the integrity commissioner as contemplated, just so you know that, okay? So I will go to the next one here, because I think it's important that we, in a public manner, go over what the code says. Hope you can indulge me, Madam Chair.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to read it, but obviously the purpose and intent of the policy is to establish guidelines for ethical and interpersonal standards of conduct for members of council. and by improving the quality of public administration and governance, and by encouraging high standards of conduct on the part of all government officials. We want to protect the public interest. We want to promote high ethical standards. We want to encourage universal understanding of the fundamental rights, privileges, and obligations of municipal council members and members of the local boards. We want to provide a means for municipal councillors to obtain authorization for some contemplated conduct in circumstances where it's uncertain, as I indicated, and set out a means for correcting unethical conduct. Municipal council members and local boards hold positions of privilege. Therefore, they must discharge their duties in a manner that recognizes a fundamental commitment to the well-being of the community with regard to the integrity of the corporation. So the duties of council, the code of conduct is a public declaration of the principles of good conduct and ethics that the members of the West Nipissing Council have decided its stakeholders could reasonably expect of its members of council to demonstrate in the performance of our responsibilities as elected community representatives. The key stakeholders are residents, ratepayers, other members of council, staff, local boards, the province, school boards, suppliers, and the chamber. We have to deal ethically with all of them. To assist the municipality in interacting, the following obligations are expected from each member of council: that they solemnly promise, declare, and carry out their responsibilities as prescribed in the oath of office; that they familiarize themselves with and follow the procedural bylaw for council and its committees. We talked about that during the training session. Your procedural bylaw is critical. And that they follow the provisions of the Municipal Act as amended and read, and follow the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. I can get through the definitions. That won't do it. We'll get into the interesting stuff here. The standard of conduct: members must not make improper use of information acquired or have the improper use of their position as a member of council. Fair enough. Members are to act honestly and with reasonable care and exercise due diligence in the performance and discharge of their official functions. Members shall at all times seek to advance the common good of the community which they serve and act in the best interest of the municipality in such a way that the credibility and integrity of the municipality is not compromised. Members shall truly, faithfully, and impartially exercise the office to the best of their knowledge and ability, and members shall perform the function of office in good faith, honestly, and in a transparent manner. So there's the statutory provisions of the various legislation that you should be aware of. Obviously, the Municipal Act, the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act, the Municipal Election Act, the Freedom of Information Act, the Provincial Offences Act, the Human Rights Code, the Ontario Occupational Health and Safety Act, and the Criminal Code of Canada. You don't have to be an expert or completely knowledgeable in all that legislation. There's only parts of certain legislation that come into play for your duties as a councillor. So the role of the council is the same one as in the Municipal Act. The role of the head of council is also there. The role of officers and employees are there. Now, the role of the Integrity Commission. The application of the Code of Conduct for members of council and the Code of Conduct for members of local boards. The application of any procedures, rules, policies of the municipality and local boards governing the ethical behavior of members. The application of sections 5, 5.1, 5.2 of the Conflict of Interest Act to members of council and local boards. Request from members of council and the local boards for advice respecting their obligations under the Code of Conduct applicable to the member. Request from members of council and of local boards for advice respecting their obligations under procedure, rule, or policy of the municipality and or of local board, as the case may be, governing the ethical behavior of members. Request from members of council and local boards for advice respecting their provisions of the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. I think that's where the IC, sorry for the term, Integrity Commissioner, I'll start calling them ICs. That's a lot of where the IC is contacted, is if you're not sure about whether you're in conflict or not, contact the IC. Staff, we can give you the information in an education or general manner, but staff cannot provide you with advice as to whether you're in conflict or not. It's really a matter of conscience and for you to be aware of your ethical responsibilities. And if in doubt, then you want to seek advice from either a legal counsel that you may have or the IC. Obviously, 4, respecting confidentiality, to use confidential information which is not available to the general public and to which members of council have access by reason of his or her position with the municipality to further his or her personal interest or interest of others. It's a no-no. To disclose either directly or indirectly, release, make public, or in any way divulge any such information, verbal or written, or any aspect of the closed session deliberations to anyone unless expressly authorized by council or required to do so by law to do so. To disclose to unauthorized persons confidential information to which the member of council has access by reason of his or her position as a member of council. Members shall comply with the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act at all times. Public comments, discussions, and disclosures to the media regarding employees of individuals that breach a person's privacy is deemed to be a contravention of this code. Personal gain. Members may not use their position, privilege, or confidential information obtained as a result of their position for private gain or to improperly benefit another person. Members may not be a party or beneficiary under a contract for the provision of goods and services to the municipality or the performance of any work otherwise than as a councillor for the municipality. A member may not obtain a financial interest in any business of the municipality. A member may not appear on behalf of any other person before council for a fee. We have to respect the decision-making process. So once a decision is made at this table, even if you disagreed with it, the decision of council prevails, and so you must respect that. Conduct respecting staff. Only council as a whole, where applicable, has the authority to approve a budget, policy, committee processes, and other such matters. Accordingly, members shall direct requests outside of council or committees approve budget unless an emergency. All staff responses will be provided during their regular working hours. I'll touch upon that a little later. Under the direction of myself, the CAO, staff serves council as a whole and the combined interest of all members as evidenced through the decisions of council. So staff serves you, but through me. As we indicated, generally the way the description would be is that your CAO is your sole employee and that I report to you as a body corporate, and staff and Melanie and others report through the chain of command. Members shall be respectful of the role of staff to advise based on political fairness and objectivity and without due influence from any individual member or group of the council. No member shall make malicious or falsely harm the professional or ethical reputation or the prospects or practice of staff. All members shall show respect for the professional capabilities of the staff of the municipality of West Nipissing. No member shall compel staff to engage in partisan political activities or be subjected to threats or discrimination for refusing such activities. Members shall not use or attempt to use their authority or influence for the purpose of intimidating, threatening, coercing, commanding, or influencing any staff member with the intent of interfering with the person's duties, including the duty to disclose improper activity. So when you're talking with us or with me, like there are different degrees, that kind of highlights where you want to be careful as councillors to talk to people. It's a small community and we're all part of the community, and we have a lot of employees that work at this municipality who are community members and probably friends of you. So, the conversation lines get a little gray. Where it gets, where this comes into play is when you're trying to direct a staff member and really push your view to a staff member outside of this table or to me. I'm fair game with respect to that, but not others. Unless directed by me to say, okay, you can deal with Mr. Poulin on matters of his expertise, and that's usually directed in that way. The F is really, where the rubber meets the road. No member shall maliciously or falsely injure the professional or ethical reputation by spreading malicious rumors. Cause persistent excessive nitpicking, unjustified criticism, or constant scrutiny. Exclude or ignore the target. Refuse to acknowledge the target or his or her contributions. Undermine the target's efforts by setting impossible goals and deadlines, and impede or have influence on an employee's efforts in advancing promotions or transfers. The interpersonal behavior of members, they treat every person with dignity, understanding, and respect. Members shall abide by the Human Rights Code, and in doing so shall treat every person, including other members of council, committees, boards, corporate employees, individuals providing services on a contract basis, and the public with dignity, understanding, and respect for the right to equality and the right to an environment that is safe and free from harassment and discrimination. Not to discriminate. Members shall not discriminate against anyone on the basis of their race, ancestry, place of origin, color, ethnic origin, citizenship, creed, sex, sexual orientation, age, record of offenses, marital status, same-sex partnership status, family status, or disability. Age, disability, family status, record of offenses, same-sex partnership status shall be as defined in the Human Rights Code. Not to engage in harassment. Members shall not make racial, homophobic, sexist, or ethnic slurs, display pornographic, homophobic, sexist, racist, or other offensive or derogatory material, make leering, suggestive, staring, or other offensive gestures, make written or verbal abuse or threats, vandalize the personal property of others, commit physical or sexual assault, clearly, make unwelcome remarks, jokes, innuendos, or taunting statements about a person's physical appearance, racial background, color, ethnic group, place of origin, citizenship, ancestry. Make unwelcome remarks, including gestures or jokes which cause embarrassment or awkwardness. Refuse to converse or interact with anyone because of their racial or ethnic background, color, creed, sex, sexual orientation, age, record of offenses, marital status, same-sex partnerships. Very repetitive, you've all read it here. Make unnecessary or unwanted physical contact, obviously, including touching, patting, pinching, and demanding sexual favors. So that's kind of in the harassment thing. The gifts and hospitality and others. The stipend paid to each member of council is intended to fully remunerate members for service to the corporation. Members are prohibited from soliciting, accepting, offering, or agreeing to accept gifts of any kind, personally or through a family member or business connection that is connected directly or indirectly with the performance of duties of office in dealings with the municipality, or could reasonably construed as being given in anticipation of future recognition or past special consideration. The policy does not preclude members from accepting token gifts, souvenirs, mementos, or hospitality received in recognition for service on a committee or for speaking at an engagement. Political contributions that are otherwise offered, accepted, and reported in accordance with applicable law, which would be the Elections Act. Food and beverage at meetings, banquets, receptions. Food, lodging, transportation, entertainment provided by other levels of government. Stipend from another board or commission that the councillor serves on, reimbursement of reasonable expenses, reimbursement of reasonable expenses incurred, and honorariums activities connected with municipal associations, gifts of a nominal value that are received as an incident, protocol, or social obligation that normally and reasonably accompany the responsibility of the office, service provided without compensation by persons volunteering their time for election campaign. Where it isn't possible to decline unauthorized gifts, you should make the chief administrator officer aware, and I may require that the gift be returned to the sender with an acknowledgement, or be retained by the corporation or disposed of for charitable purposes. Members shall not place themselves in a position of obligation to any person or organization which might reasonably benefit from special consideration or make preferential treatment. Last but not least, the use of municipal property, services, and other resources. No member shall, for personal purposes or profit, use or permit the use of any municipal property, equipment, services, supplies, other than for the purposes connected with the discharge of municipal duties. So that's fairly clear. No member shall utilize municipal equipment such as computers, tablets, or other technical devices for intentionally making, accessing, downloading, uploading, or saving inappropriate material. This policy does not apply to the use of municipal property and facilities where such use is universally known to be available to other residents upon request. And no member shall obtain financial gain from the use of municipally developed intellectual property, computer programs, technological innovations, or other patentable items while an elected official or thereafter. All such property remains and this is important, this property remains the exclusive property of the municipality. And then conflict of interest. You must be familiar with and comply with the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act. For the purpose of this code, any pecuniary interest, direct or indirect, of a family member shall be deemed to be also the personal property of the member, of yourselves. All members shall declare a conflict of interest where they or their family member has a pecuniary interest in a matter and shall take all of the actions prescribed in the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act as if the act applied to that interest. In addition to pecuniary interest, they must perform their duties impartially such that an objective, reasonable observer, and this is over and above the Conflict of Interest Act, you should be handling your duties impartially so that an observer would conclude that the member is exercising their duties objectively and without undue influence. Each member shall govern their actions at this table using the following. In making decisions, always place the interests of taxpayers and the municipality first, and in particular, place those interests before your personal interest and the interest of other members, staff, friends, business colleagues, or other family members. Interpret the phrase conflict of interest as broadly as you can. When in doubt, you're better off to declare than not. If there, I just got it there. If there's doubt, talk to the IC. Do not make decisions that create an obligation to anybody else. If you're doing that, like as the president quid pro quo, you shouldn't be making those kind of decisions and be beholden to anybody, and they shouldn't be beholden to you. Do not make decisions or attempts to influence any other person for the purpose of benefiting yourself, other members, staff, friends, business colleagues, and or family members. Now put yourself in that position where decisions would have preferential treatment to other members, staff, friends, business colleagues, or family members, or any organization that might indirectly benefit such individuals. Promise or hold out the prospect of future advantage through your influence in return for a direct or indirect personal interest. So direct or indirect personal interest don't include a benefit that is of the general application across the municipality, a benefit that affects a member or his or her family members, friends, or business colleagues as one of a broad class of persons. The remuneration of council, the member of benefits available to council members. I don't know if I want to just continue here. Every member has the following obligations: to make reasonable inquiries when there is a reason to believe that a conflict of interest may exist, to make council or the board or committee aware of potential conflict of interest where appropriate and declare that interest, to refuse to participate in the discussion of council, the board or committee, and to not vote on the matter and seek to influence the vote or any other member, to refuse to be involved in any way in the matter once a conflict is identified, including without limitation, participating in meetings, facilitating meetings, or introduction to staff or members. If the matter which creates a conflict of interest is discussed in closed session, the member may not attend that portion of the closed session where the matter is discussed. Breach of the policy. It would be a confidential document, and there's a form right now that would be submitted to the IC. The Integrity Commissioner shall receive the request and shall carry out the investigation. All breaches under this bylaw will be treated fairly and in keeping with the severity of the infraction, giving due regard to the individual's previous conduct. Nothing in this section restricts or attempts to countermand a member's legal right to challenge any decision by council through established legal channels. So in declaring a conflict of interest, as Her Worship spoke at the start, I don't know that we have a policy. We do have this policy, and it's in our IC. When we declare a conflict of interest at the start of a meeting where you know there's something on the agenda and you declare that conflict, typically what we ask is that there's a form that's filled out and there's a register that holds that conflict. Is that correct now?
That's great.
Right. And so if you know that's going to happen, be aware that you should contact the clerk, and the clerk will, will receive your information, and you'd still declare openly. The other thing, and I see it in here, and something that came up, and we all kind of learn going around, but if anybody has a conflict of a general nature, it's probably better to disclose it openly at a certain point in time so that people, are kind of aware. We came across an instance where a conflict or a potential perceived conflict could exist. And this, during that term of council, it wasn't disclosed in that manner, yet it was known by others, without being too specific or getting into a controversial issue. And I think that if you do have one of those situations where you feel you could be in conflict, it's better to disclose it in a general manner, such as if you have a family member who's an employee of the municipality, you probably want to disclose that. Or if you have a business interest with the municipality, you might want to disclose that. Just as a general rule. I don't know how that would be captured, Mr. Sharp. Do you have an ability to just capture it?
I think that through you, Madam Chair, I think what we would do is just fill out one of the forms, put it in the register, and assume that it applies for the term of the council.
Yeah, and it doesn't preclude your or absolve you once you declared it to conduct business as usual. You still have to declare on the meeting, but it would leave no room for for confusion. I think that's all I want to say on the code of conduct. I know it's very dry, but I think it's extremely important that we're all aware of what the code of conduct means, and there is a sign off on this code as well, where you've read it and accepted it. That doesn't mean that you can't bring to council put on a future agenda a wish to have the code amended at any time to make it your code. That's fine. But we need to start somewhere, and this is the code that is being approved at council. If there are any questions through you, Madam Mayor, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Through you, Madam Mayor, for Mr. Barbo, you've been talking about the integrity commissioner. Are we able to find out who this individual is, or how we get in touch with this individual to get additional information on the proper steps to move forward? I know that in a past session, we've had discussion on moving forward and declaring conflict of interest. So I'd like to inform myself with the integrity commissioner on how to go about with the proper step.
Right. Through you, Madam Mayor. Yes. So to your first part, as soon as the integrity commissioner is selected, right now what we have is a request for a proposal that is due to be out shortly. And once the integrity commissioner is selected, that the selection of the integrity commissioner will come back to this body for ratification, and then we'll form the contract. And so as soon as that integrity commissioner is in place, feel free to do so. With respect to some of your other questions on how to move forward, typically, as I indicated to you at the start of every meeting, if you have something on the agenda where you have an interest, you basically just declare it. And when in doubt, declare it. You're just safer to declare it than not declare it. So that's my recommendation. Now, there was a lot of discussion on the finite points of the procedural bylaw in recent history and all of that. I guess my advice to council is that, and I think it's said here too, is if you're acting in good faith, and you might not have filled the right form or crossed that T, Councillor Sandy, but you've declared it, the spirit will show that you declared it. So you don't have to worry too much. My advice to you right now would be, if you have any, or to any of you, is if you have any potential systemic conflict, you would disclose it, and then let's say if one comes up where we're ratifying a collective agreement and you have a family member, not to be too general, that might be working here, you would basically, and we're coming back to give you the results of the memorandum of settlement, you probably, that's when you would declare, because it affects, you would have a direct pecuniary interest at that point. A lot of times dealing with staff, council doesn't have a lot of input with respect to the day-to-day management of staff. That's an operational issue, and that's handled by policy and by your administration. And so a lot of what happens day-to-day wouldn't affect any conflict of interest at all. So I don't know if there's anything else that, did that answer your question, sir?
Yes, thank you.
I'll just note as well here that the summary recommendations of the memo provided by staff, it does indicate that they have an RFP
Yes.
ready to go. So the integrity commissioner position runs concurrent with the term of council. So with our new term of council, there will be a new IC appointed. And staff is going through the process of sending that out to people who are qualified. We'll get responses back. Those responses will come to council for the final selection of the integrity commissioner that will be acting for us for the length of this term of council. So it's not there yet, but I would imagine that by a meeting in January,
Yes.
we should have that back to council to make the final selection for that. Anybody else have some questions? Councillor Cabaret.
Yes, just to be clear, so it's not a provincial employee, commissioner.
No.
So is there an annual fee for this person?
Well, this person charges through you, sorry, Madam Mayor. This person charges by the hour. Or you could have them on retainer, or you can have them by the hour. Now you can hear, and obviously the integrity commissioner, it is my hope that the integrity commissioner is used somewhat less. There are stories, and really it's a matter of mutual trust, mutual respect, and civility and decorum, which is already starting, which is great. But if you're going to have a contravention, yes, there is going to be a cost. Typically, integrity commissioners, Councillor Pedernay, are also lawyers. So, so it could get very pricey. And so you do really want to look at that and manage your affairs accordingly. I think that the biggest case, I think ours, was, everybody here local listens to it, but if you could imagine the city, I think it's called the city, but of Elliott Lake, I think their bill was $870,000. Yeah, that's a lot of roads. Yeah, so.
So you would think, I thought anyway, that would be through municipal affair that you deals with something like that. No?
In the past, prior to this legislation, you had the choice of appointing your own, or you had the ability to use the ombudsman as a fallback for code of conduct and IC type complaints. Now, the legislation they changed in the most recent legislation requires you to appoint your own IC. So they took that away. So you must.
So they transferred the dollar down to us.
Right.
So in other words, the code of conduct is use common sense, mostly.
Yes. Yes.
Other questions? Councillor Cassian?
Yes, Madam Mayor, through you to Mr. Barbeau. So your request for proposal is sent to a specific list of possible candidates? Or how do you select the candidates you're sending the proposals to?
So typically we don't have anybody in mind when we send things out. There is a roster of integrity commissioners who perform integrity commissioner work and who are listed. Perhaps, and so I'm going by recollection. I wasn't directly involved, excuse me, in the selection last time. Council was directly involved, but I believe, Mr. Sharm, when you were looking at it, you were looking at a list of potential ICs, and from that list, we were sending them out to that list in addition to publishing it publicly. So we do put it out there publicly, and as any supplier of goods and services in any business, they're looking at municipalities, and your ICs will be looking at different municipalities' websites and notices to apply accordingly.
And those lists or that website, is that available to us as council to look at the names of the candidates or that are?
Mel, sorry, I'm trying to, Mr. Sharm, we looked at the list, let's say when we picked the last one, there were 2 or 3, how did that come about?
Through you, Madam Chair, the Municipal Affairs actually keeps a list
There.
of persons who provide Integrity Commissioner services. I could probably find that list and send you a link. Although we're not required to choose from that list, those are generally the persons that we would email the RFP to or direct the RFP to.
In addition to publicly notifying, I would just point out roles and responsibilities. We can provide that, but the work that's involved in gathering the information, like any tender or anything like that, that's a staff responsibility. Unless council sets up an ad hoc committee to retain and do the work themselves, typically staff takes care of that for council and brings that to council. We don't have any, obviously it's a council code of conduct and it governs the affairs of council. So we don't have any skin in the game, but, and we're impartial on that. So we go out based on our information and get that. The other issue, you raised the question, and I'll answer it before it's asked, is when you're getting into, and I'll make it as a generality, when you're getting into procurement, it's one of those things after just going through the code of conduct, you have to be fairly careful of divorcing yourself from the minutia of procurement, which is purchasing, for fear of looking like you have a bias or an influence as well. So it's typically left to staff for that reason.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. So there's no action. Just information.
No, it's just to bring you, the reason to do that, and the IC document, I think it's better for council that that document be revised when you retain your IC and you go through all of the documentation and make it yours for this council.
Yeah.
So this is what it is now. I can tell you that some of it wasn't followed by the IC, some of it was. There were a lot of delays in the last IC. They didn't follow the limitation periods. And that was problematic. And so we want to really look at and reconfirm what the rules that you have, they're your rules, and what in governing the Integrity Commissioner process.
For the document that was provided, the latest code of conduct, as Mr. Barbeau mentioned, there is an acknowledgement on the last page of that code of conduct. It appears on page 39 of your agenda. And that acknowledgement does need to be signed and returned to the clerk at some point at your convenience. So, and that's just an acknowledgement. We do go through and make any changes once a new IC is selected. He reviews the code of conduct. If we as a council decide to make any changes, then we would sign a new declaration after that new bylaw is adopted. But in the meantime, the clerk would love to have your signature on that for her files. Okay.
Yep.
Oh, I'm
We'd
sorry,
be able
Chris,
to-
you need to make it more obvious. I thought you were just waving your pen at me.
Would we be able to get a copy? Just
Yeah.
Printing from this, I don't know.
So, housekeeping here through you, Madam Mayor, as I mentioned, the deputy clerk, through the clerk, is usually the kind of control resource person. Some of you have seen her name already, Janice Dupuis. Hi, Janice. Janice is kind of the council resource person, so she will ensure whatever you ask for. I prefer that you bring the requests through me in the interim until we kind of hit the ground running. And the reason I do that is because we want to ensure that we're not overburdening staff at different times. But Janice will provide you with the documentation. There are other policies that you'll need to sign off on as well. And we will have those policies for you as well.
Do that for our next meeting. Thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is 4.1.b. That's the acknowledgements. I think you just covered that. Acknowledgement of various municipal policies by council.
Right.
So,
There's a few.
okay.
This, and apologize, normally our senior staff are here. This Craddock was called away on personal reasons, but some of the interesting policies that we have, one of our most recent ones is a disconnecting from work policy. Now that basically, in a nutshell, indicates that staff need to basically, you need to minimize the contact of staff during their off hours so that they can have a good work-life balance. I'm not sure how applicable it would be in this case, other than it would be to me. And what I've indicated in the training session is typically when things once we're rolling is that unless there's like a building on fire, I'm exaggerating. Typically, things that can wait till Monday should wait till Monday. Things that need an immediate response or in the public interest, certainly reach out to me. If it's an emergency, obviously reach out to the after hours calls, and they will dispatch anyway. So that's the disconnecting from work policy. And what I've indicated is in the interim or on the short term, I have no problem if you contact me, if you have an idea or a thought or something like that. I'm fine with that until you get going. I know you have something you're talking to somebody on a Saturday at 2 and you really want the answer. Feel free to reach out. I'll be happy to respond. The next one that, we've had a little bit of interaction here. It is for conferences and travel and what have you. I don't know if you were provided with the policy for travel and expenses. Yeah.
It was included in the binder that you were provided in our first orientation session. And I also did attach an electronic copy to the email I sent in regards to both. So
Great.
both hard copy and electronic copy.
Perfect.
There. May I just go back for one moment to Mr. Barbeau on the work-life balance issue? I never knew, but when you use your Outlook on your iPad, if you hold down the send button, it comes up and you can actually schedule it to send at 8 a.m. on Monday morning or 8 a.m. the next morning. So you can actually write down all your brilliant thoughts that you have at 9:30 at night without actually having staff's devices ding at them when they're at home watching Netflix. And you can actually send it. And Mr. Barbeau, I know this, and Mr. Barbeau knows that because he gets like 6 emails at 8 o'clock every morning. So,
So at 7:59, I'll be like this, waiting for 6 times 9 now.
So it is a very good function of technology that there is actually on your Outlook. If you just hold that down, you can do a delayed send on your emails. Just for those who didn't know. I'll let you continue, Mr.
Sure.
Barbeau. Thank you.
Other policies where council becomes an employee to a degree is in the respecting of the workplace violence and harassment policy. So you should familiarize yourselves with that policy and how it could affect yourselves. It's all fairly self-explanatory, and that's an occupational health and safety requirement. And so I think it's very important that council is aware of the workplace health and safety policy. Other policies, substance abuse policies, to make yourself aware of those policies. And there is a sign off on that one, I understand. The accessibility standards policies as well. social media policy, we will be bringing you back the internet policy and the social media policy for a revision and overhaul. And so that will be brought to you as well for discussion on the appropriate use of social media, Facebook, and so forth. And so we'll be bringing that as a separate cover item in the new year, and same thing with the internet policy as well. That's all I have for that, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Okay, so with that, we will leave committee of the whole and move on to the regular portion of the meeting and start with planning. We've got 5.1 bylaw. Do I have to read that first? You're gonna pass it. I'll pass it to you because you're gonna read it out anyway. So, Madam Clerk, if you would walk us through 5.1, please.
It is moved by Councillor Cochrane and seconded by Councillor Gagnon. Be it resolved that bylaw number 2022-99, being a bylaw to accept, assume, and dedicate lands for public highway purposes, shall come into force and take effect on the day it is passed. Property known as part of Lot 8, Concession 1, being Part 3, Plan 36R 14950 in the geographic township of Eagle, West Nipissing Municipality, being part of the travel road known as Shemaine Pine Poultry Road in Warren.
Before we go through all that, you just, could you please give a brief overview of road assumptions for our new councillors? Because I'm assuming that we're going to have some.
Would you like to do it, Madam?
I will.
Sure.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. In West Nipissing, most of our areas, aside from the urban core of Cache Bay, Sturgeon Falls, and Verner, are what are called forced roads. So the roads were not laid out on in Southern Ontario, they have road allowances between every second or third concession. We don't have those here. What we have is, and it's complicated, is a 5% reservation in all of the lands that were patented in this district for roads were built. So most of our roads in the outlying areas are built on private land. So the purpose of these bylaws, and you will see lots and lots of them, is whenever there is a severance application that comes before council, we are attempting to gather up title to our roads one piece at a time. So each of these, it's a condition of every severance that is located in an area where there's a forest road that the owner convey to the municipality that strip of their land, which is physically road. So it's, they're not giving us land. We already have it. We already maintain it. It's just making sure that the title to the bed of the road is vested in the municipality.
Yeah, so they're pretty much routine applications. So we've got the motion before us. Do we have any questions on the floor for this?
Okay, can I ask a question?
Yes, of course you do.
For the benefit of council, when we convey, are we conveying only the travel portion, or are we conveying a 66 foot or a reasonable portion so that we can do the proper maintenance on the shoulders?
We are taking 10 meters from center line.
Okay. So for council, so 10 meter from center line, which is 33 feet. So it's a 66 foot road allowance, which is normally what a municipal road is. The reason that assists us, obviously, is because on the forest roads, sometimes what we have is the ability to pass through on the forest road, but there's a gray area with the shoulders. And so maintaining the roads to a standard that the public wants requires us to do brushing, ditching, and cutting. And so that's why it's beneficial to us to have it. It also, from a legal perspective, then there's no confusion if there's anything, if there's any liability that happens as to who is the owner of the road. And so it's to the landowner's advantage as well.
Any questions? Okay, all in favor? Sherry.
It is moved by Councillor Gagnon and seconded by Councillor Cochrane. Be it resolved that bylaw number 2022-100, being a bylaw to accept, assume, and dedicate land for public highway purposes, shall come into force and take effect on the day it is passed. Part of Lot 4, Concession 3, Parts 3 and 4, Plan 36R 14864, geographic township of Springer, being part of the traveled road known as Levert Drive, Chemin Levi, Sturgeon Falls.
Okay, questions, comments? All in favor?
Il est proposé par conseiller Courchaine et appuyé par conseiller Gagnon. Be it resolved that bylaw number 2022-101, being a bylaw to accept, assume, and dedicate lands for public highway purposes, shall come into force and take effect on the day it is passed. Part of Lot 10, Concession 2, being Part 11, Plan 36R 3778 in the geographic township of Springer, being part of the traveled road known as Chemin Levac, Levac Roads, Cache Bay.
Any questions? Yes, Councillor Calderay.
No, it's conseiller Gagné, not Gagnon.
Oh, je m'excuse.
Used to planning.
Yeah, she's thinking of Roger.
Excuse me.
Okay, so any other questions? Okay, all in favor? Carried.
It is moved by Councillor Gagne and seconded by Councillor Courchaine. Whereas the Poitras Drain 1972 was authorized by bylaw 106172 by the former township of Caldwell, and whereas a notice of request for drain minor improvement under section 78.5 of the Drainage Act was received from François Delorme, Normand Delorme, and Diane Delorme, registered owners of the properties known as part of lots 4 and 5 in concession 3 in the township of Caldwell. And whereas the request for drainage improvement is required for the purpose of providing access to the landowner, and whereas the requested improvement is a minor improvement within the meaning of section 78 of the Act, be it therefore resolved that Council for the West Nipissing Municipality hereby agrees to proceed with the proposed drainage improvements to the Poitras Drain 1972 pursuant to section 78.5 of the Act, and be it further resolved that K-Smart Associates Limited be appointed to make an examination of the area and, if required, prepare and file a report with the West Nipissing Municipality for the requested improvement.
Okay, any questions? Okay, all in favor? Carried. Okay, so that's it for planning for today. We'll move on to item 6, correspondence and accounts. We just have one set of minutes, I believe, and I'll let Madame Duchamp read her motion.
It is moved by Councillor Courchaine and seconded by Councillor Gagne. Be it resolved that the minutes of council held on November the 1st, 2022 be adopted as presented.
Any questions? All in favor?
Oh, I have just a question.
Yes, sure.
I'm just wondering, is it just normal that we accept the minutes and but we weren't present at the meeting?
So you,
Oh, sorry, Mr. Barlow. Thank
That's
you.
okay. There is kind of a gray area with that, with respect to approval of minutes from past councils on the carryover. You know, technically, you're adopting minutes so that they can come into it. You don't necessarily even have to do that. But I haven't seen in my, I think this is my 9th term, we typically have a carryover where we approve the minutes. I'm not sure about approving closed session minutes because they obviously have some liability to it. But usually the public minutes we do approve. But in theory, you may be right. You weren't present, but what are you going to do? Okay, thank you. So.
Okay, any other questions? All in favor? Carried. Okay, and we're going to skip over to number 9 for new business. And the first order of business, 9.1, is appointment of the deputy mayor, Mr. Westwell.
It is moved by Councillor Gagne and seconded by Councillor Courchaine. Be it resolved that Councillor Jamie Restoul be appointed Deputy Mayor for the Corporation of the West Nipissing Municipality for a 1-year term ending November the 30th, 2023.
Any questions? All those in favor? Would you like to say anything?
No,
Yeah.
just quickly, I appreciate the nomination or my name being put forward, and I appreciate your confidence in me around the table to help our team out moving forward. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I think we're all looking forward to having you in that position. Your experience is definitely going to be useful to all of us as we get moving on the business of the municipality. We really appreciate having your experience from the table. So thank you, and thank you for accepting. Okay, 9.2, the appointment of council to act as chairs for committee of the whole.
Il est proposé par Conseil Cochon, appuyé par Conseil Gagné. Be it resolved that the following members of council be appointed to act as chairs for the committees of the whole for the current council term 2022 to 2026. General Government, Kathleen Thorne-Rochon. Public Works, Danielle Gagné. Community Services, Chris Rivard. Emergency Measures and Public Safety, Roxanne Louis. Water and Sewer, Fernand Pellerin. Social Services and Health, Jamie Restoul. Economic Development, Jérôme Cochon. Planning, Anne Tessier. And Environmental, Caitlin Nicol.
Any questions? All those in favor? Carried. Okay, and next up is the appointments of council members to various boards. Madame Duchamp.
It is moved by Fernand Pellerin and seconded by NTC. Be it resolved that members of council be appointed to the following boards. Chateau Board of Management, Kathleen Thorne-Rochon, Fernand Pellerin, Jamie Restoul, and Anne Tessier. West Nipissing Nonprofit Housing Board, Kathleen Thorne-Rochon, Fernand Pellerin, Jamie Restoul, Anne Tessier. District of Nipissing Social Services Administration Board, DSAB, Jamie Restoul. North Bay Parry Sound District Health Unit, Jamie Restoul. Police Services Board, Roxanne Louis and Danielle Gagné. Cemetery Board, Jérôme Cochon and Chris Rivard. Environmental Services Board, Caitlin Nicol and Chris Rivard. Public Library Board, Caitlin Nicol.
Any questions or comments? All in favor? Okay, and the appointment of council members to various committees.
Il est proposé par Anne Tessier, par conseillère Anne Tessier, appuyé par conseiller Fernand Pellerin. Be it resolved that members of council be appointed to the following committees. Doctor Recruitment Committee, Danielle Gagné and Caitlin Nicol. Planning Advisory Committee, Kathleen Thorne-Rochon, Roxanne Louis, Danielle Gagné, and Anne Tessier. Committee of Adjustment, Kathleen Thorne-Rochon and Roxanne Louis. Accessibility Advisory Committee, Fernand Pellerin. Agriculture Advisory Committee, Jérôme Cochon. Economic Development Committee, Kathleen Thorne-Rochon and Jérôme Cochon.
Any questions, comments? All those in favor? Carried. Next, okay, item 9.5, bylaw 2022-103 to authorize signing authorities for checks and promissory notes.
It is moved by Councillor Pellerin and seconded by Councillor Tessier. Be it resolved that bylaw number 2022-103 be to authorize signing authorities for checks, promissory notes, and other documents shall come into force and take effect on the day it is passed.
You need to say who those people are?
It does in the bylaw.
Okay. Oh, yes, it's okay. Thank you. Okay, any questions on that? Okay, all those in favor? Carried. And 9.6 bylaw 2022-104 to authorize signing authorities for contracts and documents.
It is moved by Councillor Pellerin and seconded by Councillor Saint-Louis. Be it resolved that bylaw number 2022-104 to authorize the signing authorities for contracts and other documents and any instruments requiring municipal seal shall come into force and take effect on the day it is passed.
Questions or comments? All those in favor? Carried. Okay. So next we'll move on to item 9.8. No, sorry, 9.7. Bylaw 2022-105 to authorize the signing of the OPP Policing Services Contract And for comments on that, I will pass it to Mr. Barbeau.
Sure, there's, yes, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry. Madam would like to read the motion first. Thank you.
It is moved by Councillor St. Louis and seconded by Councillor Pellerin. Be it resolved that bylaw number 2022-105, authorizing the mayor and chief administrative officer to execute the policing services contract with the Ministry of the Solicitor General for a term commencing on January 1st, 2023 to December 31st, 2025, shall come into force and take effect on the day it is passed.
Do you want to give an explanation?
Sure. Looking at, again, Ms. Craddock's explanation, when we went or adopted the OP or went to the OPP, having a hard time finding wording, we entered into a 3-year contract or a contract up until the end of the what's called the FTE period, which was a 3-year contract, but actually the contract started a little sooner than that. And that period is over, and now we're going to what's called a calls for service model. And so there's a new contract that's being started going on a go-forward basis, which is for a 3-year term as well, and will be renewed after 3 years. So the way the OPP entered into agreements or was basically, and the reason that the past council of a couple terms ago selected the OPP is because they had changed their billing model. Prior to the calls for service, there used to be what's called the FTE model, which is full-time equivalent. So basically, to explain it in lay person's terms, is all of the officers were compared apples to apples with the OPP proposal, and then so the costs were very much similar to when you compare the FTE model. In fact, the cost on the first costing, I believe, was in 2012, 13. It was slightly less for the OPP, but the turnaround because of the transition cost would have made it, the payback about 20 years. When they switched to a calls for service model, which is how they bill in the province of Ontario now, it appeared that the savings were going to be much greater. And so the calls for service model has two sections. One is kind of an overhead or non-policing type services plus their overhead, which is called their base amount per household. And then there's a historical amount that's added to that, which is more local, which is based on calls for service. And that's just an amount of what it costs to service West Nipissing, to offer basic policing to West Nipissing. And so what this contract is basically entering into that phase of the agreement. This has nothing to do with the analysis that was done 5 years ago, because some of the numbers that you'll see there are much lower than some of what you're going to see at budget, because the analysis and the scenario that was put forward by the Director of Corporate Services at the time was to use the savings to pay back the transition costs. And so the cost for OPP or for policing are still at about the level of what it would be with West Nipissing Police, but the $1.3 million savings is paying back down the debt or the transition cost, to make it short. So that's basically it in a nutshell. They are here, they're down the road, down the highway. I've managed to avoid them on the highway as best as I could. There are a lot of them, and it's just basically, this is the contract that's offered in the province of Ontario.
Are there any questions? Councillor Resto.
For you, Madam Mayor, just a quick question. I know that we have the amount of sworn officers for the FTE model. Is that changing through this new model, or are we maintaining the same?
Well, it really, sorry, through you, just getting used to protocols again. It really doesn't become relevant. In fact, there's probably 60 officers in that building now, and so they're required to offer basic policing. and I'm going back in my old West Nipissing policing days, what's it called, efficient and effective standards, what do you call that in policing again? Adequate and effective, adequacy and effectiveness standards. So they're responsible for offering basic policing services. They are not counting bodies. They are offering the service as the need arises, as the call for service arise. Even when you were comparing that, when I probably providing more information than is necessary, but they are able to only provide the service for the volume that exists, whereas a smaller force has to provide a lot of time off for training, and there's no ability, so we had to have many more officers that provided the actual amount of work for the calls of service that were there. So we gave them our calls of service when they provided the billing, and they continued on their calls. So it's still basic policing, but they're able to apply less people to that because they're only billing us for what we use, and that's where the savings comes into place, Councillor Risto.
Other questions?
I think Councillor Casey.
Okay, Councillor Cassie.
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor, to Mr. Barbeau, I guess. Call for service as far as residents are concerned. So policing is based on the residents calling the OPP with whatever issue they're having.
Yes.
So if, let's say on the side roads, the country roads, speed's an issue, will they just respond to the person calling that somebody's speeding, or will they be monitoring that road on their own without being called?
A couple of things through you, Your Worship. They are offering the same policing and they're required to provide speed traps and enforcement. I managed to slow down just on time for the officer that was parked at the tourism center, if he or she is listening. So they are offering speed control as well. The other thing that they are responsive to, much like the local board, and maybe members of our police board who sit here now can comment on that, they also listen through the detachment commander to initiate hotspots. So whether it be in traffic control or break-in enters or that kind of thing, they will do proactive policing and reassign resources where the need arises. So when they start getting a lot of phone calls that way, they will do the exact same thing as others will do. Yeah.
Initiated by phone calls, really, too.
Or, yes, I mean, your email also, a call for service under the basic leasing model is whether they, if you pop in there and tell them in person, if you see them on the street or whatever, once they record it into their system, it becomes a call for service, like any. Okay?
Thank you.
Other questions? I'll put that to a vote. All in favor of the contract? So carried. Thank you. Item 9.8, award contract for HVAC system for the municipal building.
Moved by Councillor Paladin and seconded by Councillor St-Louis. Be it resolved that the quotation for the HVAC upgrades to Town Hall building be awarded to Bernard Rochford Limited, having submitted a bid of $226,900 plus HST, meeting all of the requirements.
Would you like to give an overview, Mr. Bobo?
The memo is self-explanatory. It's for a replacement of a rooftop over the fire department. 7 new humidifiers to service the space occupied by Statistics Canada. Statistics Canada, and I don't want to stretch meetings, but just by way of information, the federal government have very stringent requirements on that they're adding to leases, including humidity levels. And this is an older building, and it's been very difficult, and I compliment the Director of Corporate or Community Services and his staff for meeting their needs. And so there's that, and then obviously there's another unit that's needed in our IT room. Those IT rooms tend to get very hot. And so that's, it was a budgeted item and it's in budget.
Any questions on the HVAC proposal as provided there? Okay, all in favor? Here. Next on to 9.9, award of the animal control project. So, sorry.
Les proposé par Conseil Pellerin, appuyé par Conseil Saint-Louis. Be it resolved that the proposal for animal control services in the West Nipissing municipality be awarded to the North Bay District Humane Society, which proposal met all the requirements at an annual fee of $96,146.16 plus HST for year one, which is 2022 to 2023, subject to a 2% annual increase for the remaining 4 years of the term.
Ms. Craddock has prepared quite a nice memo on the proposed contract there. I've had a chance to read through. Does anybody have any questions they'd like to address on this issue?
Sorry,
Councillor Pellerin.
sorry, I didn't read any further, but what does that include, like, with that fee, what do they do, what do they?
Ooh, that's a,
Okay, so if you have your agenda there in front of you, there is a full scope of work outlined. So it includes all kind of the animal control services. It includes employ and supervise an animal control officer to provide service vehicles that are maintained and fully insured. It has a service provision as far as the timing. Animal control officers are available from Monday to Friday, except statutory holidays from 9 to 5, and emergency calls 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Emergency services are only for injured animals, not just for strays or dogs and cats running around. And they will also take the incoming calls and dispatch animal control officers. They will enforce municipal bylaws affecting the control and keeping of animals. And then there are a couple of exceptions to service, so they don't deal with dangerous dogs or animals. They will not, what's the other one? Do the Dog Owners Liability Act. So it's kind of outlined there. They do the prosecution. They receive and solicit applications for licenses and patrols upon the request of the municipality. There's also a reporting function and supply of traps, as well as shelter services. Yes.
Is there any additional costs if you call them out, or? No?
I don't believe so through you. I think that the contract price includes all of the services for animal control for the year.
How long is is that been, the contract with, like this? Just curious.
oh, Max, the 2,000-year-old mouse here. I believe we have been using the North Bay Humane Society for, I'm going to guess, at least 10 to plus years, more than that. Prior to that, we had when I started here, we had a local individual who was working for North Bay and District Humane Society and was moonlighting, and we had an individual contract with him for animal control. Now, that worked really well with us. What we didn't realize is that his supervisor didn't know he was doing that on the side, and that was about 20 years ago. But what he would be doing would be, and he was very active, he was very good, and he would be picking up stray animals because he was here, and he would be bringing them to North Bay. That blew up, and Then we started using an individual, a local individual here, and we were learning as we were going along, but he was doing an excellent job as a local person. And the problem that we ran into was the legislation on how to keep an animal. You could catch an animal that's stray and keep it in your house until somebody comes. We cannot. We have to have the appropriate means of sheltering an animal because we're a government agency and we weren't properly doing that. So then the discussion of the day, I'm going to guess about 15 years ago or less, but the discussion of the day is how do we want to go about that? And the cost then we calculated to build a shelter that would be appropriate and satisfy the legislation requirements was about $300,000 then. And so that's where we went out for an RP and we used the animal control people. So that's the main reason why we're using North Bay and District Humane Society really is because of the shelter issue. That's the big stumbling block to looking at somebody local. So that's to answer your question, Councillor Pevin.
Thank you.
Councillor Gundy.
Could we get through you, Madam Mayor, could we get the quarterly report for last year? I just want to see to make sure we're getting our money's worth in regards to calls for service.
Sure, we can get a report. I don't know where it was produced or what have you last year, but if it is available, I'll certainly make it available to council if you wish.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Resta.
He's quicker to the draw than me, that guy across there. Just through you, thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. Just a question about the reporting, and I'm trying to think back when I was sitting around the table last, but is that report just a written report that we received, or did it come in? And I know it's changed too with the whole pandemic and whatnot, but.
Through you, Madam Mayor, it is, the contract talks about them reporting on stats. So it's going to be a written report that we would bring back. The other thing, in addition to what we would like to do is have them come in annually. We would like all our service providers to come in and provide an update, and even some of our boards and agencies. So there is a discussion, and we are planning for council's benefit to have the Humane Society come in and provide an overview of their services and what they do, and maybe address some of the concerns that exist with council.
Sorry, Councillor St. Louis.
Through you, Madam Mayor, Mr. Barbo. So by reading this, I see that it states that the North Bay District Humane Society provides somebody 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. That is here in the municipality?
Yeah, that is what we would think, but they do patrol where they can, but they're not here 9 to 5. They're shared all over, and they have their officers, and then they come here as part of a territory. So I wish I could tell you that they're here giving us full-on service, but they're not for that. No.
And that's the reason I'm asking, because I've moved back here in 2003, and I don't think I've ever seen them in West Nipissing. So to me, that's a great concern that we're paying that kind of money for that service, but yet they're not providing the service that we require in our municipality.
Right. We have received complaints. We haven't so much, and I don't know if it's COVID or what have you, but it seems to be, and there was some transition at the management level there as well. I can tell you though that, it's like anything. You don't notice something that you don't need at the time per se, but I have seen their vehicles here, and I've seen them out around Deer Lake. So they do come when called. When we get those kind of patterns, then we do reach out to them and indicate, hey, I'm starting to get a lot of complaints with respect to whatever. One of the issues as well that they run into is that when you have a stray dog, they typically don't, and most providers don't come out per se unless you have somebody here for stray dogs. They would like you to detain them as much as possible, and that is very frustrating and problematic for our residents. I know of a person in your ward who used to work here who has a couple aggressive dogs along the waterfront. You probably heard of it. And it's an on that I could tell you without speaking too much that it is an enforcement file and charges have been laid. But it is a very difficult thing all over to do. What I would say also with this is this: there's not a contract that was signed, and before you ask the question, I can answer it. What I would want to do on behalf of council is definitely ensure that the contract has an out clause to allow this council the ability to look at the situation appropriately. We posted this RFP in September and received one response. It was, I have been contacted a few years ago, was surprised they weren't looking, by another organization that used to provide animal control for Sudbury. And because they had lost the Sudbury contract, they were looking, and I'm surprised they didn't bid. So there were other options there. But I think that the other creative thing, and I'm probably overstepping my bounds here, is it's the shelter thing. And if we start looking at it, maybe even partnering with some neighboring municipalities, that could work if we combine costs. So my recommendation to council is that if we endorse this either 5 years or shorten it to shorter years, or regardless of 5 or 15, as long as we have the appropriate out clause, that council has the flexibility to look at animal control in a more considered manner.
Thank you.
Other questions? I obviously had some questions at the time, and my concern mainly is with a 5-year contract, because I think most of us have heard concerns from people in our wards about the consistency of animal control services and the responsiveness of the animal control services. I have concerns with the fact that we are being charged for somebody here Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, when it really seems to be just an on-call service. If somebody calls, they will respond to a call, yet we can't get response to calls during weekends, which is a concern because the animals don't know it's Saturday or Sunday. So in my opinion, I would want to make sure that any contract we looked at, as Mr. Barbeau said, had an appropriate out clause. We do need to provide those services for residents in the meantime. But if it is something that as a council, we wish to see whether there are options that will better serve our community, it is definitely something we could look at down the road. I haven't seen the contract, but I'm sure with that direction from council, staff could make sure that that the wording meets our needs. So I don't know what to do with that.
Just a couple of comments, if you will, Madam Mayor. On the contract, it would come back here for ratification. The second point I would make is I think things have been exacerbated by a wider issue here that we're going to be bringing to council in a meeting or two with respect to general bylaw enforcement. Mm-hmm. When we had bylaw enforcement officers, there was a good kind of mutual support, and we had a focus on because we would be dealing with things, and they were coming out a little bit more. But now we really have a generalist in our director of corporate services, our chief accountant, who's running kind of these things, which isn't appropriate. So I think the quality of this will be also addressed once we enhance our general bylaw enforcement, and that'll be coming shortly.
What do I do with this?
It's, you would take it to a vote,
Okay.
but the contract, that doesn't say that you're coming with a
I'm not
contract.
signing the contract. The
There's not a
contract will
contract.
come back.
Right, we haven't negotiated a contract yet.
Okay, so the motion is on the floor for staff to proceed to get a contract drawn up. The contract itself will come back to council. So did you want to read the motion one more time, just because we had a bit of a discussion?
It is moved by Councillor Pellerin and seconded by Councillor St-Louis. Be it resolved that the proposal for animal control services in the West Nipissing municipality be awarded to the North Bay District Humane Society, which proposal met all of the requirements at an annual fee of $96,146.16 plus HST for year one, which is 2022 to 2023, subject to a 2% annual increase for the remaining 4 years of the term.
All those in favor? Okay, sorry, hands again. Thank you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Thank you, Terry. Okay, it is 8 o'clock. It is generally the time where somebody would make a motion to have a small break for 15 minutes. However, there are only 2 items left on our agenda. So I will leave it to the discretion of council if we want to break or if we want to plow through and finish up. Okay, so we will continue. Item 9.10, authorization to issue a statement of concurrence to Ontario Power Generation for the installation of telecommunications towers, antenna. Thank you.
It is moved by Councillor Nicol and seconded by Councillor Rivard. Whereas Ontario Power Generation wishes to erect a freestanding 67.7 meter self-supporting lattice telecommunications tower on a site located at the Crystal Falls Generating Station in the Township of Grant in the West Nipissing Municipality to meet the needs of high-quality, high-speed internet services. And whereas pursuant to the Municipality of West Nipissing's policy number 2012-407 for establishing telecommunications towers, Ontario Power Generation is exempt from the policy from public consultation due to its industrial zone designation. And whereas Ontario Power Generation does require a statement of concurrence from the municipality's land use authority, be it therefore resolved that the Council for the West Nipissing Municipality hereby approves the municipality to issue a statement of concurrence to the Ontario Power Generation for the proposed construction of a self-supporting telecommunications tower at the Crystal Falls Generating Station in the Township of Grant in the West Nipissing Municipality for the delivery of high-speed internet services.
Questions? Comments?
I have one question.
Okay, Councillor Vester.
Thank you. Mayor, through you, I'm not technical in any sense. I'm just curious because we hear often in the rural areas within the municipality about cell phone service and internet, and I know this is their personal equipment that they're putting in. I just noticed in their information that they shared that they said that the tower can also support cell signal booster equipment. So is that something on their end or is that something within Bell? And they mentioned that Bell, and it'll be tied to the radio link on the Highway 575 at Verner. So I don't know if you, I'm not assuming you know this information, maybe you do, but could this help? Or could this be any kind of conduit to helping rural services?
Thanks. Perhaps Ms. Ducharme could comment. I would generally say that if that statement was made and they're prepared to make it open and available to some private or providers of internet or cell coverage, that would be fantastic. Mel, do you have any additional info?
Not really. It is, as they said in their proposal, it could, it is, like you said, Councillor Restoll, it is for their own personal, for that generating station. But I'm assuming that if persons in the area needed booster services, they would be able to contact Spectrum Group, which is the actual provider of this internet service, and make arrangements accordingly if they require that.
Okay, Councillor Tessier.
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor, to either Mrs. Ducharme or Mr. Barbeau. The distance, I mean, that tower's in Crystal Falls. Would it be far enough to reach to, let's say, River Valley to help with the?
Through you, Madam Mayor, no. There have been some interesting initiatives in that area with towers being constructed at the end of Kipling East. I also believe that there was some work with the school board with respect to enhancing internet service for River Valley, if I'm not mistaken. I don't, maybe Mr. Boulay has additional information. One of our councilors certainly does. But for River Valley, there has been some work done.
Yeah, I know the school, it's on its own. People are not able to connect through it, so as far as I heard.
I don't
That's
have
okay.
the details, but I know that there has been some work in that area that would allow for enhanced coverage. I'd have to have a look at it. I personally don't deal with the files directly. Monsieur Poulain, do you have any?
Yeah, my understanding initially was that was services provided to the school, but there was opportunity for the community members to be able to access internet, high-speed internet through that one company, and their name escapes me. I know they were advertising for that. I don't know
Yes.
how concrete it is at this point. But that was a private sector to school board initiative that we were hoping was going to benefit our residents in River Valley. And I'm not sure it's gotten to that point yet. So we'd have to look at it a bit closer.
Yeah, because the internet, fine, but the self-service is definitely an issue because it's a dead zone.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Trustee Pellegrin?
So that tower, it's not on municipal land, it's on a private owned land, and it's their own tower.
OPG.
Okay, so anybody wants to connect with them, they go through them.
Right.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, all in favor? Carried. And item 9.11, award of the purchase of a hydraulic excavator for public works.
It is moved by Councillor Rigard and seconded by Councillor Riegel. Be it resolved that quotation for the purchase of a hydraulic excavator for the Public Works Department be awarded to Tormont Cat, having submitted a bid of $292,450 plus HST, meeting all the requirements.
Mr. Franco, do you want to say anything about the specific purchase?
The purpose of the excavator
I know.
would be to excavate. I have that much knowledge in that. With respect to the bid itself, you'll see that it's not the lowest bid. However, the bids that were submitted by other bidders, some of them are the same company in different just different years. The other thing, and I'm surprised it still made it on the sheet, is the lower bids actually did not have the specified horsepower that was required as well. And there's a variety of different reasons why staff is recommending the CAT. The engine horsepower, it doesn't meet the weight specification. It has higher fuel consumption, lower bucket digging force, decibel rating. These are all smaller things, but the larger one, I'm surprised it still made it on the list and not have been disqualified. The case not being disqualified. So the recommendation, and I think I received an interesting and good question from about the total product when you're looking at things. Tenders often, the way they're worded, become legal documents, and you typically, you have less leeway. But when you're going for submissions like this, you have a little bit more leeway, and you're looking at the total product cost. Sometimes your lowest price isn't necessarily the best price if service isn't as good, or if the machine is going to break down more and not do what you want to do. So that's why staff is recommending the CAT, not the case.
Any questions? Councillor Resto?
Just a quick question, thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. Is this a replacement item, or is it addition to the fleet?
I wish I could tell you. It was on the agenda or on the list of capital for this year, this budget year. Whether they're replacing an item or not, I'm not aware of the detail. I can get that answer for you, Councillor Risto. That's all I can indicate. I don't know whether it's a replacement or an add-on. I would imagine it's a replacement.
We're
We typically don't expand. Yes,
within budget for,
right.
thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, all those in favor? So we've come to the end of the formal agenda. I did want to say just a few words in closing for our first meeting, which I know we were all really excited to get to. So there is a space for a mayor's report. I won't always use it, but I did want to take a moment. First of all, as a council, we had some very, very exciting news this week in the fact that for our first meeting, we have the news that we are going to be welcoming a council baby into our council family. So I'd just like to take a moment to congratulate Councillor Rivard and his wife Jeanette on the announcement of expecting their first child for this coming June. I'm super excited. I'm already planning the onesie for the shower. So congratulations to you guys. I think it's a really cool way to start our term and a really nice piece of good news to head in. December is a super busy time of year. I found that becoming mayor this time of year, your calendar fills up really quickly, but I did just want to give a couple of mentions for some events coming up this week. Demain, l'école secondaire Franco-Cité organise un vernissage pour célébrer les talents artistique des élèves, 6:30 to 8 o'clock. I'm not good on my times in French yet. Au foyer et le grand gymnase. So tomorrow, Franco-Cité is organizing a vernissage for its arts students in culinary arts, visual arts, dramatic arts, choral music. It's from 6:30 to 8 p.m. in the foyer and the gymnasium. Tomorrow is also the AGM for the Co-op Régional de Nipissing-Sudbury at the Levine Community Center starting at 7 p.m. So demain, c'est aussi le AGE de la Co-op Régional de Nipissing-Sudbury au Centre Communautaire Levine à partir 19h. Friday, December 9th is the Chamber of Commerce holiday Christmas party at Marcel Noel Hall. And that starts, I believe, at 5 p.m., which is a little early. But they do have all kinds of appetizers, live entertainment planned. And Saturday, December 10th, Manettville Community Center is hosting their Christmas dinner. And that's at the community center starting at 6 p.m. So there's all kinds of wonderful things to do around our community this year. I want to thank all council for coming tonight for our first meeting. Very excited to be here. Thank you very much to staff for all your support in getting ready for this. And we'll see you next time. And Mel has some closing words to say. Sorry, Madame Duchamp.
It is moved by Councillor Rivard and seconded by Councillor Nicol. Be it resolved that bylaw number 2022-106, being a bylaw of the West Nipissing Municipality to confirm the proceedings of council at its meeting held on the 6th of December 2022, shall come into force and take effect on the day it is passed.
Questions, comments? All in favor?
It is moved by Councillor Nicol and seconded by Councillor Rivard. Be it resolved that the meeting of council held on December 6, 2022 be adjourned.
All in favor? Okay, carried. Thank you very much.